fifth session today is entitled, How Can We Support Our Leadership Teams and Each Other to Promote and Encourage Work Wellness? Our speaker today is Dr. Simon Budgeon. Simon contributes with training and experience as a doctor in emergency medicine and senior health management. He was a recent Deputy COO of Australia's largest health service. And he also board governance with Calvary Church and QH. These skills are used to achieve his greater purpose in life, which is to help build and beautify the bride of Christ here on earth. His desire in this session is to help us grow by understanding research learnings, applying them to strengthen our board and senior management teams to enable to help them to thrive over the long term. So, Simon, over to you. Thanks so much.
No? How's that? Can people hear me? Great. G'day. Hi. Thanks very much for letting me come along and have a discussion with you. I feel as though my job, I'm part-time a clinician, and part-time in senior management. So I often feel as though much of my life is like cross-cultural communication, where I've got to translate clinicianese into managementese. And now I've come to a whole new sector, which is education. So I'm going to do my best at trying to be a cross-cultural communicator between those two fields. Steve, Jeff, g'day. A few familiar faces there. Do you mind if I start with the scripture? Is that okay? Because I had my quiet time this morning and I had prepared my sort of lesson plan a few days ago. And my quiet time today sort of summarised what I'm going to cover quite nicely. So this is from Proverbs 4. And it's talking about God's word or wisdom. And it says that God's word or wisdom will give life and health to anyone who understands them. Be careful how you think, for your life is shaped by your thoughts. God's word gives life and health, but we need first of all to understand how, the wisdom of how, and be careful how you think, because your life is shaped by your thoughts. Nothing new, but for me it was a bit of confirmation that I'm hopefully heading in the right track for today. Now, some of you are going to be sort of structure geeks, and that's cool. So I just want a rough outline of where we're going and why we're covering what we're covering. Could I put you on the spot and ask you a quick question? Sure. Why did you ask me along? Do you want a mic or you're right? That's great. So hopefully I'm going to give you a whole lot of gems today, gems which I've spent decades studying and learning, and I'm going to bring the very best bits for you. Now I'm pitching it really at sort of CEO, headmaster and chair of board level. So if I'm pitching it at the wrong level or I'm getting whole education jargon wrong and stuff like that, just put your hands up, interrupt. I'm really happy with being opposed and interrupted. Okay? For those of you who need to know where we're going, I sort of see business as purpose, going to strategy, then we have this whole implementation thing. And today we're going to focus predominantly on people and culture, which you might think, how's that to do with health? Well, actually, it's incredibly tied to health. And when we get this whole flywheel of people, culture, processes, structure, i.e. logic and emotional working well together, we can then deliver consistently good outcomes. So that's well and truly evidence-based. Now I'm going to start with a bit of a story. My grandfather, I'm the black sheep in the family in that I did health. Statistically, probably about, I haven't worked out the exact details, but probably around 80% of my relatives are teachers. Okay, now I'm not professing to be a teacher, I'm not. But I want to tell you the story about my grandfather, because my grandfather, who's now passed away, he was a good man. He started a family, he went to Bible college, he became a minister. He ended up going to the mission field for 2 prolonged stints. He set up churches, he set up a school in the old Rhodesia. He achieved a lot of things. When he came back to New Zealand, he set up a lot of institutions, and we would look at him and say, look, he was a really good guy, but underneath that, being able to see underneath the bonnet, he was a really broken man, and he left a whole lot of carnage behind him through things that he probably shouldn't have done. And through it, really, when I reflect back on his life, lots of it was to do with his ability to try and sustain himself. His sustainability and his effort and his performance was a bit like a yo-yo. The thing is, every time he went through a flat stage, it would invariably hurt those around him, his close team, his family, who would pay the price of him having overextended himself. And so if I'm to bring one thing personally to you guys, it's to try and give you tips to try and help you be sustainable. We don't have to look very far into the Christian literature to see, or the Christian news, just to think of random Christian leaders who've fallen from grace in the last decade. And lots of that often doesn't start with, I think I'll do a bad thing, but rather their sustainability. The ebbs and flows go too far rather than having mature consistency. So lots of what I bring you from the health field is to try and help address the issue of consistency so that we can consistently perform for a long time. Life is a long journey. Life is a marathon, and it's what happens at the end that really, really matters. Now, holidays. We're going to start talking about holidays, because this is where our discussion really started. And why is a doctor coming and talking to you about holidays? Well, actually, holidays have quite a big impact on productivity, okay, and sustainability. And believe it or not, there's professors of holiday medicine around the world, and all they do is study holidays. Now, lots of it's driven from the economic perspective of how do we maintain productivity within our workforce, but actually lots of it's to do with personal sustainability as well. And essentially, there's a couple of key learnings which I'm going to give you. So this is like days and weeks of work condensed into 3 little wee points, okay? Biggest thing you can do to do with holidays. Thanks for telling me. How's that? Can we get some help? Okay. I'll try and speak a bit louder and deeper as we wait. Great. Thanks. So, holidays. The biggest learning from the whole field of holiday medicine is to have one holiday a year that's 3 weeks or longer. Now, if you measure things like productivity and sustainability when you come back from holiday, there's probably no benefit from an economic or from a performance perspective if you have 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 10 weeks. But having one holiday every year of 3 weeks or longer helps your long-term sustainability and your long-term productivity. Now, how this came up with Steve and I is we're looking at the CEO of our church, or the head senior pastor of our church, and the senior management, and how do we help their sustainability? So part of what we've written in to their performance management is that we have talked them into agreement that they will have at least one 3-week holiday a year, which is not church related. Okay? So number 1 point is a 1 3-week holiday of 3 weeks or longer for your long-term sustainability. Now, the other thing is to have 2 or 3 long weekends a year. But if I decide, TripAdvisor, last minute deal, I'm going to go away to the Gold Coast this weekend, then I actually get very little benefit from that. My productivity when I go back, my creativity when I go back to work, it's actually not that good. Okay? So you only get the benefit from long weekends if you have at least 6 weeks of anticipation. So it's the anticipation which actually makes the difference. Now, it's probably more than anticipation. So for you to anticipate more than 6 weeks ahead, you have to actually plan. You've got to plan sort of 2 or 3 times a year when you have a long weekend, and you've got to share it with the family, and you've got to start planning and preparing. And when you're preparing 6, 8, 12 weeks ahead, we're going away, the joy starts coming before you go away. And people's creativity at work improves while you've got anticipation. And because you spent so much time anticipating it, you've taken more photos and you then relive it afterwards. So you actually get more benefit for the weeks that follow. So last minute weekends, waste of time and money most of the time. But part of your sustainability, my advice is you book 1 3-week or longer holiday every year, and that you book 2 or 3 long weekends a year, and you schedule it out a long time in advance. That's the second gem. Now, the third gem is to do with understanding your holiday style or your refreshment style. My wife's called Philippa, or Pip, and when we went away on holidays as a young married couple and with young kids, it was okay, but it got to one stage where we were driving away on a holiday, and Pip said, "Pull over." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Just pull over." And she said to me, "I don't want to go on a holiday for you until we're 3 or 4 days into the holiday. You're cranky and we seem to argue, and it just doesn't seem to work very well until we get to about day 4. And it set us on this whole journey of going into holiday medicine and trying to understand why. And essentially it comes down, you know how we have introverts and extroverts, and there's lots of different ways that we can analyse who we are? We also have ways where we prefer to be refreshed. My wife's idea of a holiday is to go and visit all the family and see as many people as possible and spend 24 hours a day socialising. And my idea of a holiday is to go and sit on a beach, catch some waves, and have nothing to do with anyone, at least for a week. And you can see how we would oscillate between, we'll do your holiday, and I would just come back wrecked. Then we're going to do my holiday, and she'd just be lonely. And so now we have pretty much a set plan where we agree that we'll go away somewhere quiet for sort of half a week to a week, and then we'll do social things for the rest of the time, but with like about every second or third day will be a quiet day. Go, 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 rest, rest. Go, go, rest, rest. So this concept of holiday styles or refreshment styles makes a big difference. And once you understand how you get refreshed, you're much more likely to come back to work refreshed. And when we come back to refreshed, we're more decisive, we have more creativity, we're more consistent for the long haul, and it's easier for us to self-control ourselves, which means, because we all know that leadership, at least half of leadership is self-control, not other control, it's all about self-control. Yeah. And so that's the third gem. And the fourth gem, which isn't evidence-based, but there's got an increasing evidence base behind it. And that is the whole concept of unplugged. Now, I'm going to say something really scary. The last few times I've been on holiday, I've started by getting my Outlook and deleting it. And getting all the apps that are work-related and deleting them. I know that they're backed up on the cloud. Okay, so when I come back to work, I can reload them and all those thousands of emails will reappear and all those things that are saved on the cloud will reappear. Now, I actually learned this from an exec at BHP. So BHP Bilton, iron ore, etc., pretty big. One of the exec directors taught me this through his brother. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for him to do it, then I can do it. The other thing that there's an increasing evidence base, because you know how email, who likes coming back to lots and lots of emails? How many? What's your record for how many emails you've come back to? 1,000. Anyone top 1,000? It's not much fun, is it? That sense of dread. Yeah. So increasingly in the Harvard Business Review, increasingly in the literature, the grey literature or the social literature, there's this increasing trend to you put your reply in and say, hey, I'm going on holiday, nothing's going to be replied. If it's really important, send it to me after I get back. And when you come back to on day one, you've maybe got 30 or 50 emails that are actually really important, as opposed to spending half a week wading through 1,000 or 1,500 emails, most of which are not relevant, or problems which people have already sorted in your absence. So that fourth gem is really to do with unplugging. Unplugging by deleting apps, unplugging by pulling out of the email world, unplugging by even like not taking a device, although we use it for lots of other things. So it's an increasing evidence base that when people go away and they keep on checking their work emails, their cortisol levels, their stress levels, they stay high. So you don't actually get that refreshed. You don't actually come back that creative. Okay? So I've mentioned 4 gems there. What I want you to do for the next sort of few minutes at each of your tables is sort of talk about those and what you think is most relevant to your setting, and just sort of jot down. Actually, I've got a worksheet. Where are the worksheets? We'll pass around these worksheets. But if you just start the chatting at your tables, 2 or 3 minutes, not very long. Cool, thanks very much. Just what do you think is most relevant to your context and something that you can, plus minus, will actually do? If you don't want to apply it to yourself, then think, what about your board or what about your senior management team? Okay. Now, you know that bit of paper you've got? Can you flip it over so it's just a blank bit of paper? Put it landscape-wise. And at one end, I want you to draw a line that's roughly 10 centimetres, just an up and down line. And at the other edge, I want you to put a 10 centimetre line up and down. Because with this, I'm going to help you learn to live longer. Okay? So it's for those, like a 10 millimetre visual analogue scale, like a 10 centimetre line. Okay? Now, on the left-hand line, I want you to put yourself, and on the right-hand line, I want you to put the name of your spouse. If you haven't got a spouse, then put the name of your closest person. Okay? So vertical line, self, spouse. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you how to take a positive step to live longer. Okay? Now it's not saying don't smoke. It's not saying eat your celery. What it is, the biggest statistical predictor of how long you as an individual will live is the health and happiness of your spouse. Okay? On that left-hand line, I want you to put a cross on that line about how healthy and happy you think your spouse is this month. And when you go home, you're going to take that bit of paper and you're going to fold it in half so they can't see your line. And you're going to go to that right-hand line that says spouse's name and ask them, how happy and healthy do you think you are this month on average? Off you go. 30 seconds, it shouldn't take too long. Now, for those of you who are data geeks, I'm presuming there's going to be some data geeks in the audience. My challenge to you is to carry on doing this every now and again when you remember, whether you put it on a cycle, like an annual cycle, or whether you just do it every now and again when you remember. But it's well worth doing. And often the first few times you do it, you'll be quite surprised by what your partner, what your spouse says. But over time, it should unify and give you a rough idea on whether you are actually investing in your partner sustainably and therefore indirectly investing in your own longevity. Now, I'm just going to use this moment to introduce the concept. Now, I don't know whether this is a broad concept in education or not, but the whole thing of culture monitoring. In your skills, do you have like culture monitoring systems or culture monitoring surveys? Okay, some heads, some shakes. Okay, so very roughly, culture monitoring systems are a bit like this visual analog scale, where they probably indirectly are a very good barometer of how well your leadership going is and how long your leadership tenure or longevity is likely to be. And if it starts going down, that's time for you to really look at your leadership style and move things around quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be part of the demise. But equally, from your leadership monitoring perspective, if your culture monitoring is continuing to hold stable and slowly improve, then your tenure is likely to be longer. So if we look at the business literature, monitoring the culture is a very good indicator of how long the senior management are likely to remain in place and whether or not its profitability and growth continues. Okay? So it's one holistic, broad measure. Now, Australia is really good at lots of things. I want to tell you about something that Australia's first in the world at, but it's actually first in the world at the bottom end, i.e. the worst. Worse than all of Africa, worse than all of Asia, worse than America. And we are worst in the world for the years of unwellness before we die. So most people in the world, they live pretty healthy, about 18 months of demise, pass away. Australians on average are number one in the world for the number of years of unwellness. We live on average 13 years of unwellness before we pass away. So part of health is longevity, and part of it is quality of life. Now, some of you are already starting to think, it's because of our health system. No, it's got nothing to do with our health system. Okay. Some of you are thinking, oh, what else could it be? What else could it be? The data. We've always got to take the data. It's nothing to do with the data. The data is standardised and it's cleansed and it's washed and it's checked by WHO and stuff like that. Okay? This is real. This is chronic diseases. So if you want to live long and live healthy and live well, if you want to be active with your grandchildren, if you want to be sticking at your career for a good long time, then we need to start thinking about personal health and avoiding chronic health conditions. And so I'm just going to bring up the issue of moving. Okay, I'm not going to get into lots of touchy subjects, but probably the single thing as an employer that we can do is the concept of moving. If you have an 8-hour day and you're in the office, it equates to like smoking as far as your risk profile goes of your longevity. So as senior managers and the board, workplace staff health and wellness, I want you to start thinking and brainstorming at your tables about how do you get people moving. I'm just going to float a few ideas. Maybe we should do this as a group because it's a large topic. Quick hands up, who has stand-up meetings? Stand-up desks, stand-up meetings, great. What other moving things do you have? What's... Yep. Education probably isn't too office space, which is good. Just looking at gauging the room. So, what are the other advantages of stand-up meetings? Anyone use stand-up meetings? Shorter. Apologies. They're shorter. Thanks. So they're shorter. They're more to the point. With your little worksheet there, I just want you to have a quick chat at your tables and see who in your staff mix are the people who are most sedentary. Okay? You'll all have staff that are most sedentary, and what can you do for their life to help them move more throughout the day? 2 minutes. One minute. Okay, 20 seconds. Okay. Now, okay, we're just going to do a little bit of anatomy. Okay, Steve, how you going? You good? Cool. Okay, can anyone just look to the screen? Wrap up your discussions. I'm just going to quickly take you through some neuroanatomy, okay, because it's really relevant to what we're going to talk about soon. Now, very, very roughly, this is probably not news to most of you. Very, very roughly, half of our brain is very logical and structured, and very, very roughly, half of it is creative and musical, and very, very roughly, I know there's not perfect. Another bit of anatomy, this is a brain scan. You'll see that the very edges are grey, and the middle of it is white, okay? Now, those two halves of the brain, they need to talk together, because if you have people who have brains, they're born, and two halves of the brain don't talk together, they're a mess. They really can't function much at all. If you look at people who have, so people who are highly, highly structured, they might know 100 million facts, but they don't actually know how to use them. Get people who are incredibly creative and emotional, but with no logic, it just doesn't work. Again, they can't function in society. And so what's really, really key to understanding how the brain works is this thing called the corpus callosum. Okay? It's like a bridge that joins the two halves of the brain together. Now, why am I teaching you about the corpus callosum or the bridge? It's to do with performance. The performance of your board, the performance of your senior management team, the performance of your students, the performance of your staff. You see, we've got these fancy scanners called PET scanners. Now, we used to see the brain a bit like a black and white weather map. It was really hard to interpret. But now we can do scans in real time. We can put people in scanners, we can scan their brain, and we can work out how to get people to do the very best recital. We can work out how to get them to do the very best maths quiz answers. We can get them to do a whole lot of testing, and we can actually measure when the brain is in the ultimate performance zone. And essentially when the brain is in the ultimate performance zone, both sides of the brain light up like coloured Christmas trees on the scans. But they only light up if the corpus callosum is working and turned on. So it really then got us thinking, how do we turn this corpus callosum thing on? And we thought maybe it was exercise. Get people to do a whole lot of exercise, jump on a scanner, didn't work. Get people to have a whole lot of celery juice, really, really healthy stuff, jump on the scanner, didn't work. We got them to do all sorts of things, skinny people, large people, all sorts of things. And really it didn't tell us until someone started testing feelings. And what are people's feelings, and how do people's feelings affect their brain performance? And I'm here to tell you that you can turn on the zone by turning on a certain feeling. Now, this is really relevant for you. It's really relevant for your workforce. And that is the feeling of eager and interested. If you can feel eager and interested, your corpus callosum automatically just turns on and both hemispheres just light up. And you're in a really high performance zone. So this has got personal application. What was I doing before I came to do my talk? Trying to feel eager and interested. What do your students think? What's the self-talk going on in the students' heads before they do their exams? Help me, I haven't seen many kids do exams. I know what my self-talk was like at university before I did my exams. Oh man, this is going to be horrible. I hope I pass. Oh, I've got to get a really high mark. All these emotions that are putting me in the wrong frame of mind. So when we want our athletes, the AIS knows this. They coach them on how to feel eager and interested before they go and perform. Musicians know this. They often learn and get taught at the high levels on how to think and feel eager and interested before they go and perform. It puts them straight into the zone. So when you've got crucial meetings, crucial conversations, the budget's got to be wound down, there's been some moral failure that we've got to address. How do we get people into that eager and interested mindset so that they're more likely to be in the zone so we can work really well together as a team to get through this? So holding on to eager and interested is vitally important for yourself, for managing your team, for managing your students, for managing your board. Now, it's also useful to know that the corpus callosum is instantly turned off by one thing, and that is the emotion of fear or shame. As soon as someone walks into your office and they are feeling, I've been called to the headmaster's office, I'm about to get spanked, you are putting them immediately in the worst zone to be able to hear what you're going to say. They're not going to hear what you're going to say. They're trying to survive. When you've got a staff meeting and you've got to go through some budget cuts and you just put out the quiet word on the street that there's budget cuts coming and everyone's coming in thinking, have I got a job? How am I going to pay my mortgage? Fear? Shame? You're not setting it up to work well. It's not going to go well. Team function doesn't work very well. And if you look at the whole social science research on team function, again, the number one biggest predictor of team function and team dynamics is a safe, eager environment, authentic leadership. So you as headmasters, you as senior leaders, you as board members, you need to understand that people's brains are affected by eager and interested and fear and shame. Because when you've got important things that need to be done, you really need to do the groundwork before the meetings to try and help people turn up in the right frame of mind and then frame things in such a way that people are going to be able to contribute well and contribute proactively to get good outcomes for your school or for your performance or for your athletics or whatever it is. So this is really, really helpful. Now, I don't understand your context, so I'm going to give you guys at your tables again a few minutes, and I want you to talk about which areas in your individual skills are lowest performance at the moment. Because what I know is when you look at lots and lots of organisations, the areas that aren't doing very well, the lowest performing, are almost always areas of cultural hotspots. We call them in health cultural hotspots, where fear and shame are usually predominant. And simply by getting a fix-up crew to go in, it usually involves getting the middle management to have a bit of a turnaround, a change of heart or a change of role. But if you can turn around people into eager and interested, then most people will work out how to get their own team out of the hole by themselves. So another exercise for 2 or 3 minutes, I want you to focus on where are your lower performing areas in your school and how might eager and interested and fear and shame be useful in trying to strategise how to get out of that hole. This is awesome stuff. So say 3 minutes for this one. Okay, I'm going to do a quick fire around the tables. Okay, I want you to think about why you do your job. What are the special experiences that you have in your job that people in other industries don't get? What is your purpose? What is your meaning? Can I just have a few random things? Why did you do your job?
I love things. Students get excited for that improvement.
Great. Table behind. What experiences do you guys have that other professions don't have?
Investment in people, seeing them flourish and in our environment, seeing young people at least move towards and encounter Christ.
Yes. Yeah, great. Back tables? Something from those back tables? What's really meaningful and purposeful with what you do in your job?
Well, I think as opposed to someone who might see results, in a day or a week, we just see results over sort of lifetimes over a long period of time. And that's quite a lot of pace for one end, but it's very rewarding on another.
Great. One more, maybe the back table. What purpose and meaning do you have in your job? There's got to be some. Come on. What? Yeah, great. That's good. Now, this purpose and meaning is really important, but it's also really important from a physical perspective, from a health perspective. Because if we have talked about that brain scan, there's the white matter and there's the grey matter. Now, the grey matter is right at the very edge. And that's where our consciousness is, that's where our complex thinking and our complex reasoning is. It's where our ability to solve problems is. But the thing is, the blood supply for the brain, it comes from the very middle, near the Corpus Callosum, and it goes out like a tree. You know how a tree goes out and the branches divide and the branches divide, like a root system? And so the area with the very smallest blood supply is the most important area, where we have our consciousness and our complex reasoning. So it would make sense to have a bit of understanding about what it is that helps the blood supply to that most vulnerable area. Because when people get dementia, the commonest cause of dementia is the blood supply to the very ends of those tree roots, the blood supply to the very edge, it starts to shrivel up. And so the most important part of our brains starts to die first. So it makes sense to understand, how do we keep that blood supply going there? Now again, with fancy brain scans, different types of brain scans, we can measure the blood flow. And again, they went through that whole thing of, is it exercise? No. Is it celery juice? No. Is it emotions? So there's an emotion that we feel which is related to purpose and meaning, which is thankfulness or gratitude. When we feel the feeling of thankfulness, of gratitude, we call it, when we look at the scans, we call it a thankfulness blush. Because you can have someone who's pretty flat, and then you can get them to talk about something of really meaning and purpose, and it's like the blood supply just sends this great big blush of blood through right to the very edges and opens it up. And there's this increasing evidence base that cultures and exercises that help us to be thankful or grateful help our brain health, which helps our sustainability. So if any of your kids work for Coles, theoretically, they're paid for 10 minutes extra per shift to do a journal where the questions are focusing them on gratefulness and thankfulness. There are lots of large industries in the States which they reckon, from the grey literature, that it translates into people's performance, that shift. We know it translates into decisiveness. We know it translates into happiness. And so this concept of gratefulness, which we see in God's word, to be grateful, to be thankful. Look at Psalms. Throughout Psalms, there's all these calls to being grateful and thankful to God. And each time we're thinking grateful and thankful, we're just doing this great big thankfulness splash of blood right through our brains, which helps our brain health. Now, every time I have a patient in my hospital or my department who's over 100, I try as much as I'm able to go and see them. And almost always they have the same sort of story. They almost always have the same sort of story of, I had a great life. We didn't have much money. I had a great family. I went to school with bare feet. We didn't eat much. I had to walk up the snowy mountains. Life was really, really hard. 3 of my kids died, but I'm so grateful. Grateful, 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 grateful. And the evidence is still catching up, but there's an increasingly appearance of a link that people who are grateful consistently live longer. And we look at the blue zone literature, i.e. people who live greater than 100 years old and who are healthy more consistently than other groups of people. They are cultures where gratefulness and thankfulness is built into everyday functions, where there's lots of gratefulness and thankfulness. And I just think they're spending their whole lives being bathed in gratefulness and thankfulness blushes, which helps to nourish their brain. So it's a nice concept, but how do we get that into our families and into our schools? So on a family level, we can build it into our meal times. We can build it into our kids, us coming home from work and the questions we ask. I try and ask my kids each time at bedtime when I go and say hi to them, hey, what was something good that happened today? Did anything sad or bad happen? What's something you're thankful to God for? And it's a dance that we do every single night. And they're not allowed to answer the same thing as yesterday. So it's got to be a new thing every day. But it's how do we build these little traditions into our family that help us to train our children in a culture of thankfulness and gratefulness? Now, I don't know your staff or your context or how it works, but I want you to start thinking, how do you start to ritualise and build in gratefulness and thankfulness into your everyday routines? Whether it be your assemblies, your huddles, your staff meetings, your education programs. But there's a big incentive for you to start working this out. So let's say 3 minutes again, just to really think through the concept of gratitude and thankfulness, and how do you turn it from a nice theory into something practical, which actually will cause the brain flush. Okay, anyone tired at the moment? Anyone been tired in the last few days? Yeah? Yeah, we've all been tired, haven't we? Yeah. In fact, we increasingly live a tired lifestyle. So, how much sleep do you think you need? Someone at that table? Just 8. This table? Yeah. More? Yeah. 7? Yeah. 9? There's lots of different numbers, aren't there? Yeah. Okay, because the society that we're living in, what I want to talk about now is consistency. Now, we've talked about concepts to do with health and long-term consistency. I want to talk about the more micro level, like the daily consistency. How we have bursts of coffee worn off. Lunchtime, get outside, go for some exercise. 2 o'clock in the office. About how do we try and moderate our energy output. So there's an increasing awareness that of people being tired, and how do we moderate our performance throughout the day so that we're more consistent, so that we can be more predictable, so we can be higher output and consistently make really good decisions. Now, there is a magical number how much sleep you need, okay? And you all mention different numbers, and it's because there is no magic number, okay? So my best answer for you is the last long weekend you had off, how many hours did you sleep when you didn't have an alarm? And that's probably pretty close to what you should be aiming for every night. Because I know that the higher we go up leadership ranks, often we go through increasing seasons where we try and burn the candle at both ends, and it doesn't work. And cumulative fatigue, its number one effect on the body from a health perspective is your decisiveness and the accuracy of your decisions. When you're in senior management, we need to be decisive. We need to consistently make really good decisions. So keeping attention to your sleep is not like an optional extra. It's not like, do I go to the gym or something like that? This is really important because you want to be decisive and you want to make good decisions consistently. It's no good if we're a leader, we only make good decisions 40% of the day. It's no good if people are looking to us and we're only making quick decisions 50% of the day. We want to be consistent. So sleep, there's 3 little gems to do with daily consistency. One is be honest with yourself about sleep and don't try and burn the candle at both ends. If you're not too sure how much sleep you need, it's all individual variant and it will change throughout your life cycle. But just think about the last long weekend you had and that'll give you a rough guide. Now the other is an increasing evidence base in the literature again to do with personal recharging. And we know that the more and more people that we supervise, often, particularly as Christians, as we take on servant leadership, there's this tendency that what gets squeezed is our personal health and our family. Those are the things that tend to be squeezed, and they're things that can't be squeezed because they affect our long-term sustainability. So when you look at the CEO literature, the corporate stuff, the people who are consistently high performers for a long time, and you go and look at their lifestyles, they generally have 15 to 60 minutes a day, which is something that they look forward to, which is their personal recharge time. It's not reading a chapter of the Bible because I have to every day. We should do it if it can be, if that's what you're really, really keen about. What I'm trying to say is there's obligation. Going to the gym, because it's an obligation, will not help your recharge. Going to the gym, because you're looking forward to it, and there's anticipation, and you can see it coming, that will help you to recharge. So increasingly in this corporate literature, 15 to 60 minutes of something that you look forward to, and try and separate it from your obligations. Okay? So that's the second gem there, is to try and think about what is the 15 to 60 minutes of a personal recharge that you can put into your day that isn't actually trying to achieve something else at the same time. It's a bonus if it does. Now, the other concept that's getting increasing airplay in the literature is to do with micro-refreshment for consistency. Now, I'm just going to give you a demonstration of what it does not look like. I feel that meeting's finished. Flick, flick through my emails. Actually, next meeting's 30 minutes, 30 seconds away. Quick ABC News update. What am I doing to my brain? I'm wearing it out. When I'm tired, which organ is tired? It's your brain. How does your brain recharge? It rests, it chills. So when we fill those chill spaces that used to be filled with, okay, I'll go for a walk, when we fill that with ABC News, we're not letting our brain recharge. When we're, when there used to be, I don't know, because I wasn't around then, but I see these movies. People would have a break between meetings and they'd put their feet up, have a smoke. We don't recommend smoking, but that's what they used to do. What I'm trying to say is people used to, when they had a break between things, they used to pause, look at the leaves, stare at the clouds, look at the water. Now we've become so accustomed to filling it up that we're not letting our brain rest, and we're starting to pay the price and becoming less decisive, less self-controlled. So my challenge to you is to start thinking about your daily consistency and the importance and the doctor's advice. The doctor says you must have micro breaks. Okay? They are really, really helpful. They're really helpful for your next meeting. They're helpful to keep you being decisive all through your day. So part of this is actually starting to think, okay, how many times of checking the news is actually healthy? And then try and stick to it. How many times of checking an email is actually healthy? Balancing health and productivity. For some roles, it might be twice a day. For some roles, it might be 5 times a day or on the hour. But if it's not your time to check email, is it really the healthy thing to do? Or should you maybe just be pausing, having a social chit-chat with someone, walking to the photocopier and back, moving, social interacting, popping outside for a few minutes? So this concept of micro-breaking is, increasingly important as we try and allow our brain to recharge. So every time you think of tiredness, we often think, I don't get enough sleep. But I want you to start linking, I'm starting to feel tired. I'm not allowing my brain to recharge enough. I'm tired, therefore how do I let my brain recharge? Make sense? It's not rocket science, is it? It's all in God's word. Just go to the peace and the quiet. Yeah. Okay, so let's just have 2 minutes talking about those concepts. The one of sleep, the one of sort of 15 to 60 minutes of recharge time, and the concept of micro breaks. 2 or 3 minutes, how might you apply that? And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a wrap with, basically what we'll do is we'll get each table to start to consolidate their key learning points, and we'll just share them as a room and make comments. And I'm quite happy if you sort of disagree with certain parts of those comments or want to reframe it or refine it a bit. So a couple of minutes to just talk about the concept of brain recharging, and then we'll go and wrap as a team. Okay, now we're going to do a rip around the tables. Now we've got 10 tables and we've got 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm an emergency doctor, and in health, they joke about emergency doctors having really short attention spans. So we're going to stick to 1 minute per table, okay? So let's just start at this table across here. What are your top 3, plus minus any comments? Feel free to use that minute how you want to. Top 3 concepts.
No time. Oops, sorry. Feelings. I'm just that eager and interested and grateful. Fire up the brain and increase productivity. That's pretty amazing and great to hear. Unplugged increases productivity.
Yeah.
I think we probably knew that, but it's good to hear. And mini breaks, personal recharge time, really important, and they're not really hard things to do. Quick walk, just to take that break and recharge the tired brain.
Great, nice one. Thanks very much. Next table. What were your thoughts or reflections?
I can think of. I can think of two. So the grateful, thankful thing really caught myself personally, and I know that there are people in schools who are writing little cards about I'm grateful for, or I am grateful to you because, and just putting it in another staff member's pigeonhole, and thankful. The 3-week thing, actually physically planning that 3-week, and the downtime, no phone.
Great. You'll enjoy it. Great. Next table, front. Top 3 things.
I think one of the key things is the brain is such a beautiful organ, and what struck us was your comment about eager and interested versus fear and shame, and the power of those emotions that can make a difference in work performance. We also realized that we are better at thinking than doing, so very challenged to be more intentional about getting the rest. That 3-week vacation sounds really good right about now.
Yeah. One of those interesting things is the higher we go up in organisational charts, the more we do thinking and the less we do doing. So hence the importance of the more senior we get, the more we need to concentrate on the doing.
I think the same themes seem to be coming up. 3 weeks, but 3 weeks unplugged.
Yes.
That idea was fantastic. And
Yeah.
the problem about being unplugged and actually deleting apps, I think it's great. I think we should be doing that, because the reality is we all have to have our phones on us wherever we go these days, just to even check in anywhere. So
Yeah.
you can't go without a device. You have to have it with you. So delete the apps. Great idea.
Yeah.
Eager and interested as opposed to fear and shame. One of the things we just mentioned was making sure that if you happen to ask for a meeting with a staff member, making sure that you give them an idea of what that's about. Otherwise, they immediately start fearing the worst. So
Yeah.
something like that. And then lastly, that personal recharge time. It's not an indulgence, and it's important to ensure that, as we said, if you're going for a run or you're going for a walk or you're going to the gym, when it becomes an obligation, it was interesting to hear that you don't get the benefit.
Yeah.
And even if that happens to be because you're injured or whatever and you're not necessarily able to exercise as well as you might, you need to make sure you get the best benefit you can out of those activities.
Yeah. Anticipation is a bit like thankfulness prospectively. Like in anticipation, it's like thankfulness before the event occurs. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Focusing again on the eager and interested, that as leaders, it's really important that we model that we model being eager and interested, being intentional about those micro breaks. So to deliberately, intentionally focus on those micro breaks, and the thankfulness that is something that is a really easy habit to get into, and something that needs to be cultivated. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Well, again, gratitude. My husband's a cancer survivor, and I think that his doctor says that he's probably the most positive person I know, and that had a real bearing on the fact that he actually has survived for 5 years. So the importance of cultivating gratefulness. I thought also the concept of moving, that it's really important for our admin staff, because as teachers, you're up and moving around in your classroom, but the person on reception or in admin need to be reminded that they should get up and go to somebody else's desk instead of sending an email. And the micro breaks. I personally, more than a micro break, from Friday night till Sunday evening, I don't look at social media or emails, and that's my discipline as well. So.
Great. That's a really good point. People who have cancer, who proactively, intentionally practice gratitude, they live longer. That's not debatable. Yeah. Next table.
Awesome. So the big ones that we resonated with is the 3-week holiday. Obviously, being unplugged is an amazing, exciting concept, which we'd love to put into practice. Also, I think the micro breaks was a really personal one that was really helpful, and just thinking through, just the thought of, I'm feeling tired, so I need to actually take a break and recharge, rather than going, I'm really tired and push through.
Yeah.
Which doesn't achieve. But the most important one, I thought, was just the real clarity around how gratefulness and thankfulness creates a culture that is really powerful. And
heard of stories of actually starting meetings with hearing about what God's done in the past, testimonies, and actually how that changes the culture of meetings, rather than coming with looking at the problem and thinking around the fear and anxiety of, I've got to do something to fix this problem. Actually hearing what God's done.
Yeah, trust and action. Awesome. Rear table?
I think the holiday one has struck a chord for everyone, and that anticipation of holidays. I think gratitude was probably our next one, and I don't think we got to a third one, did we? They're all good.
Awesome. Thanks heaps.
Look, I'm reminded about the power of gratitude and the power of emotions. I'm going to start my meetings differently. I'm going to start exams differently, my lessons differently. Again, just a positive start could be so changing. Unplugged. I turned off notifications a little while ago, and it's changed my life. Got rid of that anxiety. I love that. And I would recommend a good book on this topic, The Body Keeps the Score. Something that I read about. It's awesome. Thanks.
Great. The body keeps the score. Thanks.
I'm just really thankful for all the great ideas coming out of the room, if I'm honest. There's so much wisdom in here. But I was quite struck by the planning for long weekends well in advance and that excited anticipation that comes leading up to that. Don't often do that, but I'm going to take that one on board.
Something I do with my staff is every year sit down and plan their whole year. So they get a 3-week holiday and 2 or 3 long weekends. So that as a supervisor or a line manager, I can help to hardwire healthiness into the organisation. So yeah, it works really well. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Simon, so much for presenting today. This is a little gift just to say thank you. Couple of things that I learnt. For those of you who are aspiring school leaders and aspiring future principals, build into your contracts holidays just to make sure that you get that 3-week rest. From a personal note, certainly that thankfulness was certainly something that I really took away. It is so important to be thankful, and to share those praise points that we have with our meetings and with our staff is very important. And for those of you who are keen, as a measure of accountability with, wanting to make sure that we set the tone right and lead by example, 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, if anyone wants to keep me accountable with going to the gym, I will see you there at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning.
As long as there's plenty of anticipation.
Lots of anticipation. And if you're interested, I'll even plan a workout for you. I think I'm doing quite well working out on my middle-age spread.